Siberia occupies a large part of eastern Russia, stretching from the Ural Mountains to the Pacific Ocean. It spans nearly 11 time zones and covers an area of about 13 million square kilometers, larger than most continents. Much of this region remains sparsely populated, shaped by long winters, extreme cold, and limited access. Temperatures here regularly fall well below freezing for months at a time. In many areas, the ground never fully thaws. Rivers freeze solid. Roads disappear under snow. Movement becomes seasonal and depends on weather and terrain. Despite these conditions, cities, towns, and industrial centers exist across Siberia. They are built on permafrost and connected by rail lines, winter roads, and air routes. Supplies arrive slowly. Infrastructure is designed to endure cold rather than resist it. What do we actually know about this region? Kamchatka lies far east of mainland Siberia, extending into the Pacific Ocean. The peninsula is defined by volcanic activity rather than cold alone. More than 300 volcanoes rise across its surface, and dozens remain active. Earthquakes are common. Steam and ash shape the landscape year-round. Much of Kamchatka is inaccessible by road. There are no continuous highways linking settlements. Travel depends on aircraft, boats, and seasonal routes. Large areas remain untouched by permanent infrastructure. Distance and terrain limit movement more than population size. Volcanoes dominate the geography. Some rise over 4,000 meters. Lava flows, ash fields, and geothermal vents alter the land continuously. Snow and ice cover higher elevations, while lower valleys remain active with heat from below. In several locations, glaciers exist alongside hot springs. Rivers carry nutrients from volcanic soil into the ocean. These waters support large salmon runs that return each year to spawn. Brown bears gather along riverbanks during peak seasons. Their presence reflects the availability of food rather than human settlement patterns. Much of the interior remains uninhabited. Large areas are accessible only by helicopter or on foot. Weather changes quickly and without warning. Fog, snow, and volcanic ash can ground aircraft for days. Travel plans are often adjusted or abandoned entirely. Protected areas cover significant portions of the peninsula. National parks and reserves limit development and preserve natural systems. Human presence is regulated rather than expanded. In many locations, there are no permanent structures at all. The land continues to change through eruptions, erosion, and seismic movement, largely unaffected by human activity. Human activity is concentrated in a few coastal areas. Fishing and processing facilities support local economies. Supplies arrive by sea and air. Weather often disrupts schedules. Fog, storms, and strong winds delay transport without warning. Infrastructure is built to withstand instability. Buildings are reinforced against seismic movement. Roads are designed with the expectation of damage. Repairs are routine rather than exceptional. Life here operates with the assumption that the ground itself is not fixed. Despite its isolation, Kamchatka plays a strategic role. Its coastline faces major ocean routes. Military and research installations are present but limited in number. Much of the region remains protected or undeveloped. Kamchatka presents a different set of constraints than the rest of Siberia. Cold remains a factor, but heat from the earth is equally influential. The peninsula exists between fire, ice, and water, shaped by forces that continue to act without pause. Oymyakon is known as one of the coldest permanently inhabited places on Earth. The settlement is located in eastern Siberia, several hundred kilometers from the nearest major city. Winter temperatures here have dropped below -70 degrees Celsius. Cold dominates most of the year. Life in Oymyakon follows strict limits set by temperature. Buildings are small and heavily insulated. Pipes are kept shallow or above ground to prevent freezing. There is no centralized sewage system. Fuel and supplies arrive by winter roads that function only during the coldest months. Water does not flow freely here. In winter, it is cut from ice or delivered in containers. Food storage depends on freezing rather than refrigeration. Meat and fish remain outdoors, preserved by the air itself. Farming is limited. The ground stays frozen beneath the surface even in summer. Movement becomes difficult during extreme cold. Vehicles must remain running or be reheated before use. Metal parts can fail without warning. Batteries lose power quickly. Travel is planned carefully and often postponed when temperatures fall too low. Despite these conditions, Oymyakon remains inhabited year-round. Families have lived here for generations. Daily routines are adapted rather than resisted. Cold is treated as a constant factor, not an emergency. The surrounding landscape offers little protection. Valleys trap cold air. Mountains block wind but also prevent heat from dispersing. Temperature inversions keep the cold close to the ground for long periods. Records often draw attention to Oymyakon, but statistics alone do not explain why people stay. The settlement exists because it has always existed. What keeps a place like this permanently inhabited? Oymyakon functions at the edge of human tolerance. It does not expand or modernize quickly. It persists within narrow boundaries defined almost entirely by climate. The Road of Bones connects Magadan with the interior of northeastern Siberia. It was built during the Soviet period to support mining and transportation across a remote region. Construction took place largely between the 1930s and the 1950s. Much of the road was built by forced labor. Prisoners worked in extreme cold with limited equipment and inadequate supplies. Many did not survive. Permafrost made burial difficult. In some areas, bodies were placed directly into the roadbed. This practice gave the route its name. The road follows valleys and river crossings rather than straight lines. Mountains, frozen ground, and seasonal flooding determined its path. Bridges were temporary or absent. Ice crossings replaced permanent structures during winter months. Maintenance remains difficult even today. Temperatures along the route can fall below -50 degrees Celsius. In winter, vehicles travel long distances without services or settlements. Breakdowns are dangerous. Assistance may be hours or days away. In summer, thawing ground and deep mud create different risks and delays. Travel along the road requires preparation. Drivers carry fuel, food, and spare parts for long stretches. Communication is limited. Weather changes quickly. A single delay can leave vehicles isolated far from the nearest settlement or repair facility. Despite its history, the road is still used. Trucks carry fuel, food, and basic supplies to remote towns. Small communities depend on it for access. Modern vehicles have replaced older equipment, but conditions remain harsh and unpredictable. There are few markers along the route. Many labor camps no longer exist. Foundations and rusted structures remain in some locations, but much has been reclaimed by forest and tundra. The landscape offers little indication of what occurred here. The Road of Bones functions as infrastructure, but it also serves as a record. Much of its history is not marked or explained. The route remains in use, shaped by the same terrain and conditions that defined its construction. Lake Baikal is located in southern Siberia. It is the deepest freshwater lake in the world and contains a large share of the planet's unfrozen fresh water. The lake extends for hundreds of kilometers from north to south. Its depth and volume distinguish it from other inland bodies of water. Baikal formed through tectonic activity. The basin continues to widen at a slow rate. Earthquakes occur in the region, though most are minor. The surrounding terrain consists of mountains, forests, and river valleys that feed into the lake. Water conditions change with the seasons. In winter, the surface freezes solid. Ice thickness can reach more than 1 meter in some areas. Cracks form as temperatures shift. These fractures produce sound and visible pressure ridges. During this period, the frozen surface becomes a transport route for vehicles and supplies. In summer, ice retreats completely. Water temperatures remain low. Visibility is high due to limited sediment. Boats replace winter roads. Access depends on weather and shoreline conditions. Storms can disrupt travel without warning. Settlements along the shore are limited in size. Infrastructure is concentrated in a small number of locations. Fishing, research, and local transport form the basis of activity. Industrial development is restricted to protect water quality. Access to the lake varies by location. Some shorelines are reachable by road, while others require boats or aircraft. Seasonal changes affect supply routes and emergency response. Planning depends on ice conditions, wind, and visibility. Scientific stations operate year-round. Data collection focuses on water quality, seismic activity, and biological change. Long-term observation is prioritized over short-term use. Baikal supports unique ecosystems. Many species found here do not exist elsewhere. Fish populations depend on cold, oxygen-rich water. Seasonal cycles regulate spawning and migration patterns. Environmental monitoring is continuous. Human presence around the lake is regulated. Protected areas limit construction and resource extraction. Tourism exists but operates under restrictions. Waste management and access controls are enforced to reduce impact. The lake also affects regional climate. Water moderates temperature along the shoreline. Fog forms during periods of contrast between air and surface conditions. Weather patterns shift near the basin. Baikal functions as both a natural system and a logistical factor. Its frozen surface allows movement during winter, while open water restricts it to specific routes in warmer months. Activity adjusts to these cycles. The scale and depth of the lake set limits on use rather than encouraging expansion. Operations around Baikal proceed cautiously. Conditions are stable only within narrow seasonal windows. Chukotka is located in the northeastern part of Russia. The region borders the Arctic Ocean and the Bering Sea. Distance and limited access separate it from the rest of the country. There are no continuous road connections linking Chukotka to central regions. Pivik is the northernmost city in Russia. It is situated along the Arctic coast. Winter conditions dominate most of the year. Sea ice restricts marine access. Shipping is possible only during short seasonal periods. Outside these windows, air transport remains the primary means of connection. Settlements across Chukotka are small and widely spaced. Many can be reached only by aircraft or by sea during summer months. Supplies are delivered once or twice a year. Fuel, food, and construction materials are stored in advance to last through long winters. Delays affect heating, electricity, and basic services. Infrastructure reflects these constraints. Buildings are compact and reinforced. Utilities are designed for low temperatures and long periods without resupply. Repairs require time and coordination. Replacement parts are not readily available. Mining and resource projects operate in limited areas. Activity depends on access, transport costs, and global demand. Some sites expand temporarily, then slow or close when conditions change. Beyond settlements, tundra extends across large areas. Seasonal wildlife movement follows coastlines and inland routes. Human activity remains concentrated in a small number of locations. Chukotka functions under strict logistical limits. Access, supply, and movement are determined by season and weather rather than distance or population size. Mirny developed around one of the largest diamond deposits ever discovered. The town is located in western Yakutia and was built to support extraction in a remote and frozen environment. At its center lies an open-pit mine over a kilometer wide and hundreds of meters deep. Mining shaped the settlement from the beginning. Housing, roads, and utilities were constructed to serve a single purpose. The pit dominates the landscape. Its size affects wind patterns and restricts air traffic. Helicopters and small aircraft avoid flying directly over the opening due to strong downward air currents. Operations here depend on cold. Frozen ground provides stability for heavy equipment. In warmer months, activity slows as surface layers thaw and water accumulates. Pumps operate continuously to prevent flooding. Maintenance is constant. Failure is not an option in this environment. Supplies arrive by road and air. Fuel, food, and machinery must be delivered across long distances. Seasonal access determines schedules. Delays are common. Planning accounts for weather rather than deadlines. As extraction declined, Mirny changed. Some facilities closed. Population decreased. Parts of the town were repurposed or abandoned. The mine remains as a visible record of industrial ambition in an extreme setting. Mirny exists because of what lies beneath it. The town did not grow outward or diversify widely. Its scale and structure reflect the limits of operating in permafrost. Here, industry adapted to geology, not the other way around. Kadychan is an abandoned settlement in northeastern Siberia. It was built during the Soviet period to support coal mining in a remote region. The town grew quickly and once supported several thousand residents. Mining defined daily life. Housing blocks, schools, and services were constructed around a single industry. Supplies arrived regularly while extraction continued. The town existed because the mine required it. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, operations slowed and eventually stopped. An explosion at the mine accelerated closure. Residents were relocated. Utilities were shut down. Heating systems failed during winter, making continued habitation impossible. Buildings remain, but maintenance ended decades ago. Apartments stand empty. Furniture, personal items, and documents were left behind. Roofs have collapsed in some areas. Snow and ice fill interiors during winter months. Vegetation grows through concrete and asphalt. Road access remains limited. Seasonal routes connect the area, but traffic is rare. There are no services, shops, or functioning infrastructure. The settlement is not officially maintained or repurposed. Kadychan was not destroyed by natural disaster. It was abandoned through policy and economic change. The town remains as it was left, shaped by cold, neglect, and time. What remains is not a ruin reclaimed by tourism, but a place that quietly reflects the end of a system rather than a single event. Magadan sits on the coast of the Sea of Yakutsk in Russia. It functions as a regional port and administrative center. The city developed as a gateway to the interior during the Soviet period. Its growth was tied to mining and transport. Supplies, equipment, and people passed through the port before moving inland. Roads and air routes connected Magadan to settlements scattered across a vast territory. Distance and weather shaped schedules more than planning. The city also holds a difficult history. During the mid-20th century, Magadan served as an entry point to labor camps across the region. Many prisoners passed through the port before being sent north and east. Memorials now mark some of these locations, while much remains unmarked. Today, Magadan supports fishing, shipping, and regional services. The harbor operates seasonally due to ice conditions. Storms and fog often disrupt movement. Air travel remains essential for reliable access. Buildings are compact and practical. Infrastructure is designed to function in cold and coastal conditions. Magadan connects land and sea in a region defined by isolation. It serves as a point of arrival and departure rather than a destination itself. Movement continues through the city, shaped by geography and history. The Kuril Islands form a chain stretching between the Kamchatka Peninsula and northern Japan. The islands sit along a major tectonic boundary where the Pacific Plate meets the Eurasian Plate. Volcanic activity defines the region. Many of the islands were formed by eruptions, and several volcanoes remain active. Settlements are limited and widely spaced. Only a few islands support permanent populations. Access depends on sea conditions and weather. Strong winds, fog, and heavy seas regularly disrupt travel. There are no continuous road networks linking the islands. Movement is shaped by geography rather than planning. The landscape is steep and unstable. Cliffs rise directly from the ocean. Landslides and erosion are common. Vegetation grows quickly during short summers, then recedes under snow and wind. Infrastructure is minimal and built to endure harsh coastal conditions. Marine life is abundant. Cold currents carry nutrients that support fisheries across the region. Fishing remains the primary economic activity. Processing facilities operate near harbors where access allows. Strategic importance has long influenced the islands. Military installations and monitoring stations are present on several islands. Civilian development remains limited by terrain and climate. The Kuril Islands exist between land and sea. Volcanic forces shape the ground, while ocean conditions dictate movement and supply. Isolation here is not measured by distance alone, but by how often weather permits connection at all. Sakhalin is a long island located off the eastern coast of Russia, separated from the mainland by narrow straits. Access depends on sea conditions and air routes. Winter ice can limit shipping. Storms and fog disrupt schedules throughout the year. The island supports oil and gas extraction. Infrastructure is concentrated near production sites and ports. Pipelines, processing facilities, and export terminals operate under strict weather constraints. Movement of equipment and personnel follows narrow logistical corridors. Delays are common when conditions change. Settlements on Sakhalin are limited in size. Roads connect some areas, but large portions remain difficult to reach. Supplies arrive by sea and air. Storage and planning account for interruptions caused by ice and storms. Farther south, Vladivostok serves as a major Pacific port. The city connects rail, sea, and air routes at Russia's eastern edge. Shipping schedules depend on tides, wind, and seasonal weather patterns. Ice affects operations during colder months, though access remains more consistent than in Arctic regions. Vladivostok supports trade, naval activity, and regional administration. Infrastructure is dense compared to surrounding areas. Movement concentrates around the harbor and rail terminals. Beyond the city, terrain and distance limit expansion. Together, Sakhalin and Vladivostok mark a shift from interior isolation to coastal logistics. Sea routes replace winter roads. Weather replaces distance as the primary constraint. Activity increases, but operations remain shaped by conditions rather than scale. The Pacific Coast introduces different risks and advantages. Access improves, but dependence on maritime routes adds variability. Movement, supply, and industry continue to operate within limits set by season, wind, and ice, rather than continuous connection. The Trans-Siberian Railway runs across Russia from west to east. It connects European Russia with Siberia and the Pacific coast. The line extends for several thousand kilometers and crosses forests, rivers, mountains, and permafrost zones. Construction began in the late 19th century and continued into the early 20th century. The railway was built to move people, goods, and resources across distances that had previously required months of travel. It established fixed routes through regions with limited access. Tracks were laid across unstable ground. Bridges span wide rivers that freeze in winter and flood during spring. Maintenance is constant. Crews work year-round to keep the line operational under changing conditions. Towns developed along the route. Stations became supply points and centers of movement. Some expanded into cities. Others remained small, but depended entirely on rail access for fuel and food. Freight remains the primary function. Raw materials move west. Fuel, machinery, and supplies move east. Passenger travel continues, shaped by distance rather than speed. The railway concentrates movement along a narrow corridor. Large areas beyond the tracks remain largely unchanged. The Lena Pillars rise along the banks of the Lena River in eastern Siberia. The formations extend for many kilometers, forming a continuous wall of stone above the water. Some towers reach heights of more than 100 meters. These structures were formed over hundreds of millions of years. Layers of limestone were shaped by wind, water, and temperature changes. Seasonal freezing and thawing continue to erode the rock. The process is slow and ongoing. The pillars change shape over long periods rather than visible moments. The river plays a central role in the landscape. During summer, boats move along its course, providing one of the few access routes to the area. In winter, the frozen surface becomes a temporary road. Movement depends on ice conditions and timing. Seasonal extremes define access. High water, ice thickness, and sudden weather shifts determine when travel is possible. These conditions limit activity and keep large portions of the area isolated for long periods. The surrounding region is sparsely populated. There are no large settlements nearby. Infrastructure is minimal. Most visitors arrive by river or small aircraft. Supplies must be brought in and removed carefully to limit impact on the environment. The Lena Pillars are part of a protected natural reserve. Development is restricted. The site is preserved primarily for its geological significance rather than tourism. Human presence remains limited and controlled. The formations stand as a record of time rather than activity. They reflect processes that existed long before settlement and continue regardless of human use. What remains visible here is not history in motion, but time held in stone. Olkhon is the largest island on Lake Baikal. It lies near the western shore and separates open water from smaller bays and channels. Access depends on season and ice conditions. In winter, vehicles cross the frozen surface. In summer, transport relies on boats and limited ferry service. Settlements on the island are small. Roads are unpaved in many areas. Infrastructure is basic and designed to operate within narrow limits. Electricity and fuel supplies are planned in advance. Delays affect daily activity and transport schedules. The island's terrain includes steppe, forest, and rocky shoreline. Soil is thin in many locations. Agriculture is limited. Fishing and small-scale services support the local economy. Most movement occurs along a few established routes. Protected status restricts development. Construction permits are limited. Waste management and water use are regulated to reduce impact on the lake. Seasonal population changes occur, but permanent residents remain few. Weather influences operations throughout the year. Wind conditions affect boat travel. Ice thickness determines winter access windows. Visibility changes quickly, limiting movement without warning. Olkhon functions as a transitional zone between land and lake. It does not serve as a transport hub or industrial center. Activity remains local and seasonal. Operations adjust to lake conditions rather than altering them. The island continues to operate within constraints set by water, ice, and limited access. The Ussuri Taiga lies in the far southeastern part of Russia, near the borders with China and North Korea. The region is covered by dense forest and rugged terrain. Access is limited. Roads are few and often seasonal. The climate here differs from much of Siberia. Summers are warmer and wetter. Winters remain cold, but are less extreme. These conditions support a mix of northern and southern species not found together elsewhere in Russia. Wildlife includes large predators, such as the Amur tiger and the far eastern leopard. Their populations are small and closely monitored. Movement follows forest corridors and river valleys. Human presence remains restricted to small settlements and research stations. Forestry and conservation operate under regulation. Protected areas limit logging and development. Patrols monitor wildlife and illegal activity. Distance and terrain complicate enforcement. The Ussuri Taiga functions as a biological transition zone. It connects ecosystems rather than infrastructure. Activity remains focused on preservation and limited resource use. Operations adjust to forest conditions, seasonal access, and the absence of large transport routes. Yakutsk is one of the coldest major cities in the world. It is located in eastern Siberia and built entirely on continuous permafrost. Winter temperatures here often fall below -40 degrees Celsius and can remain there for long periods. The city is designed around these conditions. Buildings are raised on concrete piles driven deep into frozen ground. This prevents heat from melting the permafrost beneath them. Underground infrastructure is limited. Water pipes, heating systems, and sewage lines are routed above ground and heavily insulated. During winter, daily life follows temperature more than time. Cars are left running to keep engines from freezing. Metal becomes brittle. Exposed skin can freeze within minutes. Breath turns to ice in the air. Sound carries farther in the cold, dry atmosphere. Despite this, Yakutsk functions as a regional center. It supports schools, hospitals, industry, and government services across a vast surrounding area. Supplies arrive mainly by air and by winter roads that exist only during the coldest months. Transportation reflects the same constraints. Air travel remains essential year-round. River crossings are possible only when ice reaches sufficient thickness. Seasonal routes determine when fuel, food, and building materials can move in and out of the city. Planning depends less on schedules and more on temperature windows that change each year. Summer brings different challenges. As surface layers briefly thaw, roads shift and floodwaters appear. The ground becomes unstable, construction slows. Yakutsk does not attempt to defeat the cold. The city operates within its limits. Life here continues because systems are built to accept temperature as a constant condition rather than an obstacle. Norilsk is located far north of the Arctic Circle. The city stands on continuous permafrost and is isolated from the national road network. There are no permanent highways connecting it to the rest of Russia. Access is limited to air travel and seasonal river transport. Norilsk developed as an industrial center during the Soviet period. Its location was chosen for proximity to large deposits of nickel, copper, and palladium. Mining and metal processing shaped the city's layout, infrastructure, and population. Housing, power supply, and transport systems were built to serve industrial operations rather than regional movement. Climate conditions dominate daily life. Winter lasts most of the year. Temperatures remain well below freezing for long periods. Strong winds increase exposure. Snow accumulation affects visibility and movement. Outdoor work follows strict safety limits. Buildings are constructed on deep piles to prevent heat transfer into frozen ground. Underground utilities are limited. Heating systems operate continuously. Maintenance is constant. Failure during winter can affect entire districts within hours. Supply routes depend on season. During summer, cargo moves along rivers when ice clears. In winter, deliveries rely almost entirely on air transport. Fuel, food, and equipment are planned months in advance. Storage capacity determines stability through long cold periods. Emergency planning is critical. Backup generators, fuel reserves, and food supplies are maintained continuously. Response to failures depends on staff availability and weather conditions rather than delivery speed. Environmental conditions are heavily influenced by industrial activity. Emissions affect air quality. Soil and water systems show long-term impact from extraction and processing. Monitoring programs operate continuously. Cleanup and mitigation efforts exist, but face logistical constraints. Population movement reflects these conditions. Some residents arrive for fixed-term work. Others leave after short periods. Long-term population levels fluctuate with industrial demand and living conditions. Services such as healthcare and education operate within limits set by staffing and access. Despite isolation, Norilsk remains active. Industrial output continues year-round. Transport schedules adjust to weather rather than calendar dates. Operations are organized to function within narrow margins set by temperature, access, and supply reliability. Norilsk does not serve as a transit point. It exists as a destination defined by industry rather than connection. Movement flows inward and outward according to extraction cycles, not geography. The city illustrates a different aspect of Siberia. Here, extreme climate combines with large-scale industrial presence. Norilsk functions where infrastructure, labor, and environment meet under sustained cold and isolation. The Altai Mountains are located in southern Siberia, near the borders with Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and China. The region marks a transition between forest, steppe, and high mountain terrain. Elevation increases quickly. Valleys give way to ridges, glaciers, and plateaus. Access to the Altai is limited by terrain rather than distance. Roads follow river valleys and mountain passes. The Chuya Highway serves as the primary route through the region. It connects scattered settlements and provides seasonal access to higher elevations. Travel conditions change with weather, snow, and landslides. Glaciers remain across the highest ranges. Meltwater feeds rivers that flow north into Siberia and south toward Central Asia. Seasonal runoff affects movement and infrastructure. Bridges and roads require regular maintenance. Flooding and erosion are common during warmer months. The climate varies sharply by elevation. Lower areas support agriculture and grazing. Higher zones remain cold for most of the year. Snow persists into summer in some locations. Weather changes rapidly. Visibility can shift within minutes. Settlements in the Altai are small and widely spaced. Infrastructure is basic outside main routes. Supplies arrive by road. Planning accounts for seasonal closures and delays. Some areas remain accessible only during specific months. Cultural and economic activity follows geography. Pastoral practices continue in valleys and foothills. Tourism exists, but remains limited by access and conditions. Development concentrates along established corridors rather than expanding outward. Mount Beluga is the highest peak in the region. It rises above surrounding terrain and supports permanent ice. The mountain influences local weather patterns and river systems. Access to the area is restricted by terrain and seasonal conditions. Glacial zones limit movement and construction. Trails remain narrow and exposed. Equipment and supplies are carried over long distances. Rescue operations depend on weather and visibility. access to higher elevations is restricted for much of the year. Border proximity affects administration and transport. Checkpoints regulate movement near international boundaries. Some routes are closed or monitored. Infrastructure development accounts for jurisdiction, terrain, and seasonal access rather than traffic volume or demand. Seasonal closures are expected. Travel plans include delays. Movement follows terrain and weather, rather than fixed schedules or permanent routes. The Altai also includes remote plateaus and steppe landscapes. Soil depth varies. Vegetation changes with altitude and exposure. Wildlife movement follows elevation gradients and river systems rather than administrative boundaries. Transport through the region remains slow. Distance is measured in hours rather than kilometers. Weather, road quality, and terrain determine pace. Delays are common and expected. The Altai does not function as a single corridor or center. Movement disperses along valleys and routes shaped by geology. Large areas remain beyond regular access. As a final region in this journey, the Altai reflects many of the same constraints seen elsewhere across Siberia. Geography sets limits. Climate defines timing. Infrastructure follows terrain rather than reshaping it. The region connects mountain systems, river sources, and borders, but remains defined by isolation and scale. Activity continues within narrow margins set by elevation, season, and access. The Altai operates under the same conditions that shape much of Siberia, where movement, settlement, and use are determined by land rather than intention.